Chapter 2 of To Kill a Mockingbird has Scout going to school for the first time. She's entering first grade and she learns the hard way soon that school life is different than home life. Jem isn't going to want to be hanging out with her anymore because he's in front of his fifth grade friends. And in general, her first day of school is just a miserable experience. So, Scout is in a pretty uneducated community. It's a community where lots of people have to work on farms. It's a pretty much agricultural community. And education just isn't the most prized thing in the town, and there's not the best quality education per se either. Now, Scout, on the other hand, she grew up reading. Calpurnia taught her. Atticus had her reading stock market quotes in the newspaper. And so she's basically a fluent reader and writer. And that actually intimidates her new teacher, who we meet, whose name is Miss Caroline Fisher. Miss Caroline Fisher is green per se, which means she's fresh out of college. In the text, it says she's maybe not even 21. And Miss Caroline Fisher and Scout are at odds with each other in this chapter. I think that Miss Fisher is actually intimidated by Scout because she wants to feel like she's necessary and there to help these kids, but Scout really is just bored because everything is so dumbed down almost for her. There's one moment where the teacher writes some alphabet letters on the board, and Scout remarks that all the kids in the room had seen those alphabet letters before because they saw it last year when they were in first grade. They all failed basically. So we meet Miss Caroline Fisher. There's also an incident with a student named Walter Cunningham who doesn't have any lunch, and Miss Fisher tries to offer him uh, money to buy lunch, and Scout ends up embarrassing herself, telling Miss Fisher basically why Walter doesn't have lunch, and it's that he's poor. They have no money. But he won't accept any money from her. And Scout, in an embarrassing moment, basically explains this to Miss Fisher. And you'll read this chapter to see ways where Scout is actually doing things with good intentions, but the teacher misunderstands her. Scout and the teacher are just not on the same page pretty much. And I'm sure you could relate to being frustrated at times when an adult just didn't understand you or didn't understand where you were coming from. And really, the biggest issue I think that happens in this chapter, or the biggest miscommunication, is just that Miss Fisher is an outsider. She's not from the community of Maycomb, Alabama, and so she doesn't really know the ways of Maycomb. She's kind of approaching it as if, well, I'll back up. She's approaching it with high expectations, and almost her expectations for the class maybe shouldn't be quite as high. I think one mistake she makes too, though, is that Scout could be like a star student for her, but there's a moment where she tells Scout, "Now, you tell your father not to teach you anymore. It's best to begin reading with a fresh mind. You tell him I'll take over from here and try to undo the damage." And so that's middle of chapter 2. She pretty much almost scolds Scout for knowing how to read already and tells Scout to tell her dad, "Stop teaching you." So read the chapter to see, there's some comic moments and you'll see what other conflicts exist. Um, and you'll see basically how Scout's first day goes in general.